He'll be happy to know that our guy's back. Oh, his head just fell off. Perfect interlude in transition to part 4 of this pop-up course, where we read from a chapter in One Simple Idea by Mitch Horowitz. The chapter is called Does It Work? And when Mitch talks about it working, positive thinking, a lot of these new thought, law of attraction, law of assumption ideas, he doesn't mean, and I don't mean, like, does it work? Like, is it real? You know, both Mitch and myself, we know that these manifesting concepts, there's validity to them. There's tremendous power to them. We know that. We're not denying that. I think why we're doing this pop-up course is because so many people kind of gullibly take this information in and don't really meditate upon the deeper implications of it. Yes, this stuff works, but does it work in the way it's supposed to work and bring the fulfillment it's supposed to bring? And is it as straightforward and as simple as a lot of these new thought teachers say? I think the answer a lot of time to that question is no, but you got to figure that out for yourself. This course, what Mitch wrote here, is hopefully prodding us and taking us more in the right direction in terms of figuring it out for us. So today, I'm going to read from a section called Thinking Big. Just continuing right on with what we've been covering. All right. When confronted with questions of evil and suffering, new thought, unable to fully account for tragedy and limitation in a self-created world, tended to slip into circular reasoning or contradiction. New Thought's popular minister and writer, Joseph Murphy, tried to confront the problem of suffering in his 1971 book, Psychic Perception. Murphy, in a similar vein to U.S. Anderson, described man as subject to the thoughts of a world mind or race mind, which contained the substance of every thought, good or ill, nourishing or punishing, that every soul had ever conceived. Hence, an infant born ill could be a victim of this world mind. To assume, as Murphy does, that every thought has a potential ripple effect, so that a person can be affected by something thought centuries earlier, places us at the mercy of a near infinitude of influences and outcomes. This amounts to a tacit acknowledgement of randomness or accident, the very thing that Warren Felt Evans said didn't exist. If you're wondering what Warren Felt Evans said and how there are no mistakes, which is something we often still hear in New Thought, Law of Attraction, and Law of Assumption circles, check out the last video and just the playlist in general. You can find it up here. I'll put the link in below in the description. Mitch goes on to write, by the early 21st century, this hopeful, innovative movement of New Thought, which posited man as a being of ultimate self-destiny, seemed incapable of accounting for man in his varied roles and predicaments. In 2007, The Secret's creator, Rhonda Byrne, who was the preeminent New Thought voice of the early 21st century, replied to a reporter's question about what caused the Holocaust by saying, the law of attraction is absolute. Byrne continued, in a large-scale tragedy like 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, etc., we see that the law of attraction responds to people being at the wrong place at the wrong time because their dominant thoughts were on the same frequency of such events. When facing ultimate moral questions, Byrne, like Terminera, more than a generation earlier, spoke of the experience of others, describing events that she had never personally encountered or reckoned with. Opinions, like philosophies, demand verification, either by logic or lived experience. Burns' logic was akin to that of a person visiting a neighbor's house, whistling for a dog, receiving no response, and concluding that the neighbor has no dog. She took no account of possibilities outside of her purview. Mitch continues, the next section is called A Pathless Land. This question of personal verification highlights one further challenge to New Thought. As noted earlier, the positive thinking approach seeks measurable outcomes. In effect, the individual is promised, if I think correctly, I will escape, recover, receive, and so on. This perspective can ultimately reduce the human search to desire attainment. This is not to say that desires are wrong. Indeed, an individual's desires may point to profound and necessary things at certain stages of life. But seeing a law of attraction as the governing principle of existence is potentially damaging because it limits self-discovery to what I might generally think my needs are, not what they may be in the light of the deepened question that mysticism encourages. The search for awareness is at risk when we are told precisely what our deliverance is supposed to look like, the fulfillment of what we want. The 20th century spiritual teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti observed, truth is a pathless land. When the path is mapped, usually based upon our current mind's eye image of where we want to be, the inner search and the unknown realizations that it may bring are proscribed. A narrowly conceived new thought can slam close the doors of perception that it was once envisioned to open. That concludes today's reading. So yeah, for some of you, this course might be getting pretty dry. And I don't know how many more, we're probably gonna do at least another 1 or 2 videos on this chapter, but everything I read here, I think is pretty darn important. One thing that always struck me well before I ever got into these law of attraction ideas is that most of my so-called spiritual epiphanies or realizations in life, like the deep spiritual stuff I experienced, was impossible to articulate or to put words on, let alone a philosophy upon. It was pathless, as Krishnamurti said in that famous quote. You can't label it. And that's what, a previous viewer talking about mysticism and how, how we think of quote unquote traditional mysticism is that you can't label it because it's so alive, right? It's in your bones, right? New Thought seems either intentionally or unintentionally to get stuck in theory, intellectualism, in our head, not in our whole mind and body. And even though we hear so much about feeling and acting as if and really feeling the feelings, there's this mental thought process of what is going to happen, what we want, who we are, what the self is, that strikes me as very limiting unless you view it in a more open and dynamic way. If we do that, if we view these quote unquote laws as being dynamic, it becomes very exciting, practical, pragmatic, and a real force to help us change our lives for the better. And, hopefully change the lives of others. And by improving ourselves, being able to improve other people's lives. But when we view them dogmatically or say just truly stupid shit, like Rhonda Byrne famously said, when she was talking about 9/11, Katrina, all that stuff, we're totally missing the point. So, yeah, there's a lot to chew on here. And I think the more open we can be and the more we can utilize the so-called law of attraction as just one tool, one concept that we can then play with and make our own, the more beneficial it will be for us, generally speaking. To view it as this one dogmatic law, as Mitch has shown us, just from reading these few excerpts from this one chapter, and he shows us time and time again in the book, if you read the whole book, it's limiting, it's confining, it's seemingly very self-centered. So, yeah, I think next episode, yeah, I guess episode, yeah, the next video in this course, one thing that I really like about this chapter is that Mitch says there's basically 4 schools to the positive thinking movement. And you can agree with this or not, but it's interesting, these 4 schools that he comes up with. So we'll look at that with the next video. Yeah, if you have any questions before then, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at info@radicalcounselor.com.